Hey people of this beautiful world, welcome back to Angelic Embrace, where we document and narrate the glorious and life-changing near-death experiences sent in by you guys. It is greatly appreciated. So sit back, relax, know that you are loved, and let's get into today's near-death experience story. Consider subscribing and watching to the end to find out what happens. Let's get into today's near-death experience story. The entirety of my existence flashed before my eyes in a single moment when I passed out, despite the fact that I was unaware of my passing because it had to have been very unexpected. To put it another way, I'd say that the duration of this procedure was a fraction of a second at most. It brought back a lot of information that I had completely forgotten about from many years ago, since it was really thorough. Almost instantaneously after hearing this, a mechanism in my mind went into autopilot mode, and as a result, I began to evaluate myself without my consent. There was not the slightest bit of reasonable or deliberate thought that went into this. It happened really quickly and I had no control over it. It was as though a previously unknown computer program within my head had suddenly begun running. Because of what transpired after that, the judgment could not have been very good. Since there was no inner voice speaking to me or any other means of understanding what was going on within, I am not truly aware of what kind of evaluation I made of myself. As soon like it happened, it seemed like I was falling through the ground, as if the ground were no longer solid and I were free falling or something. I am not really sure how to put this experience into words because there is nothing that I can draw upon to explain it. The only thing that comes to me is that I physically dropped through the ground, rocks, minerals, water, and other things like that. It was more of a physical passage through the solids, which at this time were anything but solid. It wasn't so much a tunnel as it was just moving through the solids, as if the interactions between the atoms that make up the earth were of no concern, and as if I were only passing through it. I could make out particles of pebbles, sand, soil, and other things moving past my eyes. Even though I was aware of the things moving through me, I did not feel any discomfort or friction as a result of this. On the other hand, it was a little bit scary. I had the impression that I had been falling for quite some time before I crashed on a floor in the corridor. This caused a great deal of discomfort, and the floor was incredibly rigid, unyielding, and icy. I was able to regain control of my emotions and rise up before I noticed that I had fallen on a highly polished green marble floor that was located in a corridor that led in two different directions and was bordered on both sides with doors. The same green marble tiles that covered the floors were also used to cover the walls of the passageways. The dimensions of these eras were between 28 and 36 inches square. They were fairly enormous. They had been extensively polished to the point that they seemed completely smooth, higher in reflectivity than fine glass and much smoother than that. Even though I couldn't find any lights anyplace else, the halls were bright and well lit throughout. At this point, I was experiencing a lot of confusion as well as a lot of terror. I hurried down one direction of the hallway only to realize that there was no end to the corridor and that it was lined with more and more doors. I had no idea where I was or what was going on, so I decided to open a door and look around to see if I could figure it out. Behind this door was a room that was completely vacant with the exception of a lady and a toilet that was located in the middle of the room. The woman was kneeling down to clean the toilet. She ignored me until I spoke to her, at which time she was clothed in clothing that were filthy and worn out. I was curious about who she was, where I was, and what was happening on, so I asked her those questions. She ordered me to leave her alone and get out of her house immediately. After that, she remarked, "He is constantly watching ... get out of here." I begged her to pause what she was doing and have a conversation with me, but she said, "I can't." I requested that she cease what she was doing and provide an explanation to me on what was taking place. She only stated that he is present at all times. It's up to me to clean the bathroom. Once more, I implored her to cease, but she responded that she was unable to and that I should go immediately. I proceeded to another door down the hallway and unlocked it. Inside, there was a man who appeared to be restrained in a chair that resembled a barber's chair, and three ladies were forcibly feeding him food. The man was unable to communicate because food was always being pushed into his lips, which meant that his mouth was never empty. There was a table next to the chair that was full of food, and as the ladies picked up more food and pushed it into the man's mouth, more food would appear on the table to replace what had been taken and used up. There was a table full of food next to the chair. I was shouted at by one of the women to get out of there. I inquired as to what was taking place and where I was located, and the woman said, "You don't know," while laughing at me. She warned me to stop yelling at her and said, "He is constantly watching, and we can't stop." She then left the room. I ran quite a distance once more, but the hallway remained unchanged. Just a never-ending expanse of green marble with doors on either side. When I finally unlocked the third door, I found yet another man bound to a chair, and there were 3 stunning naked ladies dancing about him as if they were making fun of him. I attempted once again to find out what was going on, but the women ignored me, and the male was unable to speak since he had something in his mouth that prevented him from talking. As a result, I started running down the hallway once more, thinking to myself that if I kept going in the same direction, I would eventually come to an end of the corridor, a crossroads, or anything else. I ran quite a distance, but I couldn't figure out how to get out of the corridor or open any of the doors that were along it. After working myself to the brink of physical weariness, I came to a rest when all of a sudden a man approached. He stood at a height of around 6 feet 2 inches, with skin that was white and hair that was jet black. He was wearing a sharp suit and a tie of the same color. He unlocked a door that was adjacent to us and requested me to follow him into the room so that he could explain everything to me. Once we were inside, he closed the door behind us. As soon as I came inside the room, the first thing that struck me was how much larger it was compared to the other rooms that I had been in. I would estimate that it was probably 3 or 4 times as big. There were 2 seats and a very long banquet table in the room. The table had nothing on it other than a white tablecloth that extended the whole length of the table. After he prompted me to do so, I sat down in the chair he offered. He then asked me whether I was aware of who he was by looking directly at me. When I heard this man speak, he used the language in a way that was much superior to anything I had ever heard any person use in my whole life. It was very clear that this individual had a very strong command of language and words. His use of language that was calming and soothing was quite effective. In addition to that, this man had a strikingly nice appearance, was immaculately groomed and manicured, and the suit he wore was expertly fitted. I told him that I had no idea where I was or how I got here, and that I was completely lost. He stated that he had not been anticipating my presence but was pleased to do so regardless. When I asked him where I was, he refused to answer my queries and instead brought up other topics for us to discuss. When he asked me whether I was hungry, I said that I probably was, but that my stomach wasn't the primary focus of my attention just then. When I turned around and glanced at the table, I saw that it was piled high with food. The presentation of the dish was exquisite, and it was delicious looking. He told me to grab a bite to eat first, and that he would explain everything to me when I had finished. I was at a loss for what to do, so I tried several different foods. I do not recall the specifics of what it was that I tried, but I do recall that it was perhaps the most delicious thing I had ever eaten. I was curious about the woman I saw cleaning a toilet in a room, so I asked him who she was and why she wouldn't talk to me. He didn't answer my question. The man stated that no one in any room would talk to me since they are not permitted to do so and that everyone would simply remain silent. He stated that the lady was cleaning the toilet forever because it never got clean, and that washing toilets was one of the things she truly detested doing in her life. He said that the woman was cleaning the toilet forever because the toilet never got clean. I responded by asking her why, if she despises it so much, she doesn't just give it up. According to the man, she is unable to refrain. I found myself pretty perplexed. I inquired about the man who was being made to eat food nonstop as well as the other man who had 3 naked ladies dancing around him. I was told that they were both the same person. The man who was saying that said that the other man loved sex and life and that now he would spend eternity looking at the most beautiful women but would never be allowed to touch them. The man who was saying that said that the man who was being force-fed loved food very much in life and was glutinous. The guy inquired of me once again regarding my familiarity with his identity. I responded with a no answer, but at this point I was feeling extremely scared since things were not going well and appeared to be very strange and very awful. The figure stepped before me and introduced himself as Satan before welcoming me to his kingdom. He said that I was quite welcome. I sprang to my feet and told him that I needed to go immediately and that he should not wait for me here. Given what I had experienced up to this point and what I was seeing on the inside, I found myself somewhat believing this man's claims, even though under normal circumstances I would write off such a person as a raving madman. I bolted out of the chamber and started my descent back down the corridor, which seemed to go on forever. Although it seemed pointless, I had no choice but to keep running because I was terrified. The man laughing behind me was clearly audible to me. Suddenly, I was aware of him speaking to me in my brain, asking, "Where are you going? There is no way out of this." I kept running and running for what seemed like an hour or more, and then I eventually located another hallway that was perpendicular to the first one and again went in 2 different directions, with the exception that this new corridor was made of red marble. I started racing down this corridor in one direction in the hopes of finding an exit, and the entire while, I could hear the voice of the man in my head yelling things at me. I do not recall anything that he said since at that time I was in such a state of terror that all I could think about was rushing away. On the other hand, he was basically telling me that I could not get away from his castle and that I could not stop hearing his voice in my brain, and other things along those lines. After what felt like a very long time, I started running again until I reached another intersection, at which point I halted. The brand new corridors were covered in white marble, but the walls lacked any doors. After pausing for a few seconds, I resumed walking down this white corridor when all of a sudden, someone from behind me began shrieking at me to halt my progress. I gave it my all and ran as fast as I could possibly go. I didn't know what was pursuing me down the corridor, but whatever it was, it scared the hell out of me. It seemed to be a gigantic head with no limbs, legs, or body to be found anywhere else. As I made my way down the corridor, the white marble began to transform into white plaster, and as I proceeded to make my way down the hall, the white plaster walls began to give the impression that they contained various body parts. As I continued to go further away, it became clear that there were individuals whose bodies had been pasted into the walls, and that these people were still alive. After that, the plaster transformed into a white substance that was flexible, and the individuals who were in the walls attempted to grasp me. I was being chased down the hallway by something, and it was shouting at me to stop, but I ignored it. When I arrived at the conclusion of I saw that it was a dead end. I was so terrified that I actually ran straight into the dead, at which point I remember the pain of my face and body being pressed against the wall at the end of the hall. However, before I fell down, the thing that was chasing me slammed right into the back of me, pushing me through the wall and into total darkness. I remember the pain of my face and body being pressed against the wall at the end of the hall. The blackness is completely devoid of any trace of light. I was unable to make out anything. I had no idea if I was falling, floating, or flying at the time. I could no longer feel the pull of gravity. I believe that at one time I stopped moving altogether. After that, a bright white light materialized, emanated from it, and completely surrounded me. After that, I guess I found myself in a chamber. In all honesty, I had no idea where I was. It had the appearance of a room, but there were no walls, ceiling, or floor. Instead, there was an immense white light that permeated the whole space. Then another man approached me from behind and requested me to sit down. Suddenly, a chair materialized behind me, and so I did as I was instructed and took a seat. This gentleman walked over and took a seat approximately 8 feet in front of me in an additional chair. He wanted to know whether I was all right. I informed the man that I was in a lot of agony since I had just run into a solid wall and then was driven through it while feeling like every bone in my body was being shattered and crushed. I explained that this happened just after I had struck the wall. Nonetheless, I don't know how it happened, but now I'm doing okay, or at least it seems that way. When I inquired about the guy's identity, he responded by saying, "Well, first of all, don't you want to know where you were earlier and who the other man was?" I stated that he had informed me that he was Satan, and the man responded by confirming that my statement was accurate and stating that although I was now residing in a section of hell, I am now in a secure location. When I asked the guy where I was at this moment, he told me that I was in a world that had been created just so that we could have a dialogue. When I inquired as to his identity, he revealed himself to be God. At this time, I was at a loss for words regarding my thoughts, but I questioned him about why he rescued me from the pits of hell, or even if that was what he did. He said that he had, in fact, rescued me from hell, and that the reason he'd done so was because he did not wish for me to pass away just yet. In a word, I stayed in this white world for close to 2 days and had conversations with God while I was there. He didn't restrict the kinds of questions I could ask, and then he didn't restrict the kinds of replies he could provide. He explained to me what had occurred to me as well as who was responsible for putting the pills in my drink. He assured me that he would be able to fix my body, that I would not feel any pain, that I would be okay, and that I should go home. At the end of all of this, he told me that he wished for me to continue my education by attending college, that I should not stop until he ordered me to, and that we would communicate further in the future. I expressed my gratitude to him, and then I was taken abruptly back to my body. When I opened my eyes, I noticed that all of my friends were looking at me and then starting to freak out. I stood up and let them know that someone had placed drugs in my drink and that none of them were my pals anymore. I withheld the name of the person who did this. I asked them how long I had been laying there, and they said about 30 minutes, and that one of them ran down the mountain to go call the ambulance. Because I did not breathe the entire time and they couldn't get a pulse on me or hear my heart beating, and I turned completely blue, and that they tried mouth to mouth but nothing started working. I responded that everything was good since God had delivered me from danger, and then I turned around, left, and down the mountain by myself. Since then, I have avoided any contact with the aforementioned individuals at all costs. I attended college, earned 3 degrees, and did well academically while having very little financial support. Before this, I had a terrible time during my college career. Following the completion of my final master's degree, God once more made His presence known to me and informed me that my academic pursuits were over. Since I had already completed some of the other tasks that He needed done, He set me to work. The primary focus for some time was communicating with a variety of individuals and congregations while also passing on messages. Sometimes He and His angels will visit me and we will have a conversation. The second time I saw the devil, it was on earth, and he recognized me and was fairly unhappy about it, but he left me alone knowing that God commanded him to keep away from me. I have seen the devil more than once, but the second time I saw him, he was on earth. This experience has never really finished and is something that is still continuing on today, but this is roughly what took place during the first one that I had. As a result of the extensive length of the document, I was forced to exclude a great deal of information. When I was in hell, I learned that there is no way out since you cannot kill yourself or be murdered because you are already dead. This is a significant fact that I feel obligated to share with you because it is crucial. That was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. The idea that you can't even escape via death and that Satan burrows himself deep inside your skull the whole time and controls you like a puppet was the worst thing I've ever encountered.